Hello again and thanks for joining. Today we've got an old Piko model to have a look at. This one is number 5/6333 and it says it's been made in the GDR, which gives you some idea about how old this model actually is. It's got a great name there, Personenzug Locomotive. Probably butchered that German there, but you can see it's a BR38 2-3 in a 460 configuration. I'm really looking forward to having a look at this, so let's get this out of the box and we'll check it out. So quite incredible. There's a whole raft of things that have come out of this box, including leaflets, extra parts to put onto this model, even some characters as well. This is a second-hand model and it is a vintage model as well, so I'm finding it quite amazing that all these parts are included in it. But let's have a quick look at what we've got. So first up, we've got this leaflet here, which has got a really good drawing of the locomotive and a bit of history and details about this model. It's in German, English, I think this is maybe Russian, and I'm not even sure what language this is in. It might actually be Polish. It says that this model is from the GDR state railways, but it was previously from the Royal Saxon Railway. So they're originally built for the lines of the hilly areas of Saxony, and it looks as though it was taken out of service in 1972. So it gives you an idea of the era of this locomotive. This leaflet has got some great pictures here, how to couple up the tender, lighting, which you can change the bulb just by removing the front of the smoke box, and lubrication points. And it also starts to show you where you can fit all the extra parts that we've got here. Here it's showing you how to take the tender apart and also more points where you can oil it. We've got an additional piece of paper here with another diagram showing all the little handrails that you can fit onto this model. Incredibly, we've got the original packing slip still. And yet another leaflet here which is talking about how to fit couplings. And here you can see the wealth of extra parts we've got to fit to this locomotive, including this collection of little characters, all pre-painted. Not very well, I have to admit, but it's quite incredible that they've done this. This is much better than what you get with Hornby with their little fireman and driver, which are just in black plastic. It looks like these two guys have fallen off the sprue. They're obviously just torsos. We've also got a range of extra little parts. We saw that in the instructions on how to fit these, including handrails, dummy couplings, even some little wind deflectors that you can fit onto the side of the cab, and of course the metal handrails for the side of the boiler. So it's really quite incredible that these have still survived. And here is the model. It does look absolutely fantastic and it's got so many parts and extras added onto it already, and we haven't even added any of the extras from the parts bag that we just had a look at. But let's have a look at this in closer detail. Now this is a tender driven locomotive, so there isn't a motor inside this part. However, it is actually quite heavy, which is great. It will stay on the track really well. And you can see all the extra parts that have been added in here are really quite cool. The smoke box door just pulls off to allow access to the light bulb inside, but it does have some nice detail, including this rivet detail on the brackets here. And the number is very clearly printed on there, along with an overhead electric flash. This part here has got some really nice checker effect on it, which runs the whole length of the locomotive. And here we have the lamps at the front that are illuminated. We have buffers, which are separate parts which have been pushed in here. And sadly, this locomotive looks as though it's had a bit of a bash in the corner here. Not too bad. I think that could just be pulled out. The buffer beam does have some detail on it, including rivets and some wiring as well. Unfortunately, we have a bit of a broken little piece here underneath, but it's fine on the other side. No coupling on the front of this locomotive. A bit more damage here as well, so it looks as though something's hit it in this direction, which is a real shame. And we have a loose piece of pipework here as well, but that does show you the attention to detail with the tiny little pipes moulded into the side of the plastic here and picked out in red. Unfortunately, it's a different colour of red than the chassis, which is just moulded in red plastic and not painted. But as we start to look down the side of the boiler, we've got all this wealth of detail here, all this pipework and extra pieces that have been added in. A little electrical flash printed on here. And look at the character of this pipework at the top of the boiler here. This is just fantastic. We've even got all these little tiny cabling moulded into the main piece of plastic. More detail to enjoy in the cab. This one looks as though it's had the handrail there broken as well. It's indicative maybe of the fragility of the plastic and just how much fine detail is on this model. The rivet detail around the windows is incredible. We've got more rivet detail down the side here, along with the printed 38234 number and the Deutsche Reichsbahn lettering. We even have these little cab side doors moulded into the main piece of plastic with this handrail coming down as well. On top of the cab, there's a line of rivet detail. These parts are really nicely moulded in, and some other pieces here as well. And as we look down the boiler, you can see a bit of a moulding mark at this point here, but it's really actually well done. It has a hole here for an extra piece to be fitted in, but you can really see the amount of detail that's been moulded in here. Inside the cab, you can see that the windows are a single piece of clear plastic that's moulded in there and pushed into the window frames. There's a wealth of detail on the back of the firebox there, loads of details. None of it has been picked out in paint, but you could easily remedy that yourself. As we look down into the red area, we've got some more rivet detail, extra parts added in, this fine piece here. Brake blocks are in line with the wheels, and they revolve pretty freely. We've actually got plastic valve gear here with a red insert and moulded in silver plastic, but it does work really well, it's quite smooth. And then this pony truck at the front, it's sprung loaded, doesn't have a huge amount of movement in it, and the wheels are fairly free rolling. Nice brake gear in line with the wheels again though. And the piston up here has got some great detail moulded in, including this little panel at the top here, and the rivet detail and the little patch on the side there as well. And it's very characterful at the end as well. So a fantastically detailed model, lots of things that you could break off here, but it certainly looks really impressive. Let's have a look at the tender. So much heavier than the Locomotive, this is obviously where the motor is, and it also looks as though it's had a few bashes in its time. This part here looks as though it's been glued back in, and there's also some glue residue on the side of the tender, which is a real shame. But you will notice it has some great rivet detail there, some really fine printing down here, some handrails moulded in at each corner. And at the back we again have these really characterful little lights. This box here, which has got some nice moulding details on it, the number printed up here, and another row of rivets along here. The buffer beam has got rivet detail on it, and some of these extra parts fitted in, these little jumper cables. And we have the coupling here, very typical of Piko. It's actually in a NEM pocket and it does have some articulation there. And down here we've got a good representation of the axle boxes with spring detail and even pipework up here on the chassis. The coal is absolutely heaped to the top as usual, and it's a fair representation, not the best but not too bad. We've got hatches at the back here and hatches here as well with a ring of rivet detail. And here where the fireman operates is a little door and a representation of coal coming through there as well. Underneath, all wheels are driven, but we have traction tyres fitted to the inner two axles, although this wheel here is actually missing its traction tyre. The outer ones don't, but they're still driven. So I think we should put this together and put it on the test track and see how it goes. So here we are on the test track, and just as normal, this is some Hornby Radius 3 track that I've got here, along with my H&M controller running on 12 volt DC. So let's give it some power and see what happens. So it took a moment to get going at the start there, but once it did, it seems to go pretty well. It's very low geared though, and a little bit noisy as you'd expect. Anyway, I've decided to take the tender apart, and it reveals this really quite extensive weight that's been put in here, and an interesting design of weight as well. It does feel a little bit plasticky here. We do have the two noise suppressors. We have lighting at the back as well, and you can see that power comes through from the Locomotive here. The motor's up here, inside this little plastic casing, and it drives all the wheels on this tender. Without the weight in it, this does feel really light, and it's probably indicative of it being quite plasticky and not very robust. And it does feel as though the plastic is getting a bit old now and a bit brittle. And because there's so much detail on this, especially the Locomotive, you're going to have to be really careful with handling this. Anyway, let's get this back together and I'll put it on the scales and see how much it weighs. This Locomotive weighs 371 grams. So this model of a BR38 2-3 from Piko, I think it's a highly detailed model with a whole raft of extras added onto it, which really make it look quite impressive. It comes from a time when Piko were obviously focusing on putting more detail into their models rather than robustness, and when other manufacturers such as Fleischmann and Marklin made parts of their models out of metal, like the valve gear, Piko have decided to go for a more scale-like look at the expense of robustness. And that means if you're handling models like this, you're going to have to be really careful because it's very easy to break things on them, especially as they get a bit older and a bit more brittle. The mechanism in the tender is decent enough, it runs fine, but it doesn't feel like a quality piece of engineering, and I don't think this will be able to pull a really long train. It certainly struggled just to get up a slight incline. But models from this era in Piko's production all actually look really good, and they come with lighting and a whole wealth of extra details added onto them as extra parts. But its Achilles heel is definitely going to be the mechanics and also the brittleness of some of these plastic parts on it. So if you're interested in buying one of these, I guess you're going to have to be very careful with it and also accept that it's probably going to come with some damage like this one does. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this locomotive. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps this channel grow. I'll put this on the turntable so you can see all the way around, and in a moment another video will appear. Just click on that and I'll see you over there. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. See ya.